The presentation is from relationship disaster to relationship master. And that's basically running off the work, and the picture of that, if you can see the slides, is the John and Julia Gottman. And so they've done like 42 years of relationship research, where what they were doing was, John Gottman was a psychology researcher, and him and his colleague set up a flat, and they would just let couples come there as if they were coming away for the weekend, but they would measure, like they would put electrodes on and they'd measure the physiological changes, and they just watched their conversation and just video, and then they correlated everything. And over 40 years, they were able to predict the symptoms and the signs that enabled them to predict with about 90 to 94% accuracy of which relationships were going to last and which one. And so what they then looked at was they showed the differences between the people that they said that were going to last were relationship masters, and then the differences between the people that they could tell, the couple that wasn't going to last, who they called the relationship disasters. So the presentation today is about understanding the difference between what makes a great relationship that's going to last and what makes a relationship that isn't going to be so rewarding and is likely to end, or if it doesn't end, it's not going to be a very satisfactory relationship. So some of the research that they've got is shown here. So it's like the average couple waits about 6 years before seeking help. So 6 years from when there's a problem to actually when they actually get help. So, and then there are slight gender differences where we'll talk about later about stonewalling, which is just where someone just goes silent and says nothing, gives nothing, shows no expression. You can shout at them, you can scream at them. It just seems that they don't care. And that's 85% of those are men. And 80% of the time, it's in heterosexual relationships, it's women that will bring up issues. It's women that will say, like, we need to have a chat. Okay, so on this slide, there's the Gottman's sound relationship house. And this shows what it takes to make a sound, happy and satisfactory relationship. So it's about, you've got to have trust, you've got to have commitment. They're the two pillars. And then it's about being able to manage conflict. There's always going to be conflict, but it's about, are you able to get over the differences? Are you able to resolve the things that you disagree with? And are you, the Gottmans talk about perpetual differences. That means that there's always going to be some difference between whoever you marry or whoever you're in a relationship with. And so it's about, what determines the relationship isn't compatibility, that you're the same, that you agree on everything. It's that you can disagree, but can you still respect and love the other person even while you disagree with the areas of difference? So then it's about a positive perspective. It's about, they talk about the relationship masters being looking for things to appreciate. So we're going to go through that in a little bit more detail. But essentially, the key motto of a happy relationship, the Gottmans say, is baby, when you hurt, the world stops. So that nothing matters more than the feelings of your partner. And you're prepared to show them that if they're really hurting, that you're able to put everything aside and they come first. And then it's about, how can we resolve this? So the nature of humans, the nature of, we are, by nature, we're animals, and we still have that kind of animal instinct where we have the fight, flight, freeze, response, and that's a response to stress. And there's always going to be an element where we have two different views as two individuals in a relationship. We have different views of the future, and it's going to be and different views about money, different views about sex, different views about how you raise children, all these kind of different views. And it's about not needing to have your own way, not fighting to the death, but a bit about, it's not necessarily, people always say it's about compromise. It's not necessarily about compromise. It's about being honest about what you want. And then it's about, okay, we're both honest. We have this disagreement. Right? How do we resolve it so that we're able to get past it and yet both be reasonably happy about it? So people often think, and the biggest fear that people have is that they're the only one, like there's something, like if their relationships don't work, it's something wrong with them, that like they're not normal, they're broken, they're somehow not built for relationships. But everything that we do as humans, everything that we do is based on our genetics. It's based on our experiences, it's based on our choices, and that determines how we feel, what we do, and what kind of a person we are. So when we're looking at that, the genetics we can't help. The genetics determine things like whether you're introverted, outgoing. They determine whether you're a cheerful type of person or whether you're more melancholy. They determine how anxious you are. So we're born with that kind of base. From then on, it's about the culture that we're brought into. It's about the family. It's about the dynamics with our parents in the family home. It's about the schools and the other social experiences that we've had. It's about the relationships that we've had. So all of these things determine like how we are showing up in our relationship now. If we've had the last 3 relationships where everyone's cheated on us and the last 3 relationships where we've been lied to, we're going to have, it's natural that unless we overcome and heal those wounds, we're naturally going to be going to feel less trusting and feel more anxious. And and then there's a small part of that is a choice. So that, like, even the fact that you're here, you're listening to this, that's a choice. It means you've made a choice that there's something that you want to work on, that you're wanting, and you're choosing to override the past. And so sometimes we're ignorant of that there's a choice. Sometimes I like to think that anything a human's gone through, some human has gone through it and solved it. So there's always a solution. But it's sometimes we don't even realize that there's a solution out there. And so once so the first level is being aware, and then it's being willing to do whatever it takes to give attention, effort, and practice, and being able to risk feeling awkward and risk confronting the things that we might not feel great about in order to overcome those things. So the outcome that we get is going to be completely different depending on our choices, because the experiences, we can't do anything about the experiences. We've had the experiences. What we can do in the level of our choices is we can look back, we can reframe, reflect, and reframe how our experiences affect us today, so we can heal the past wounds so that we are able to trust and we are able to move on. And so we can't change the genetics, we can't change the experiences, but the level of choice that we have, the leverage we have over our life, is our choice. We have the ability to choose a new way of acting and a new way of being. So, okay, so now we're going to look at what exactly did the Gottmans talk about in terms of relationship masters and relationship disasters. So here's in this slide, it's talking about the differences. So relationship masters are gentle and considerate of their partner's feelings. So if their partner's feeling, however they're feeling bad, they're feeling hurt, whatever, then they're looking to understand. They're looking to, okay, right, why do you feel that? And they're trying to understand so that they can understand their partner's framework of how they look at relationships. Whereas the relationship disasters take it personally, and they become defensive, and they feel like their partner's blaming them for how they feel. And so then what that means is, well, the relationship masters will turn towards and they'll try to understand. The relationship disasters will take that as blame, and they'll take that as feeling criticized, and so they'll turn away from. So where a relationship master will validate the partner's feelings by, even if they don't agree with them, they'll like, okay, I understand how you might feel like that. Tell me more about that. And then they're kind of validating the feeling, so the person that's hurt doesn't feel dismissed. Whereas the relationship disaster, tend to invalidate the feelings. So they're looking at they're like, well, you shouldn't feel like that, or I wouldn't feel like that, or well, you're too sensitive. So that kind of thing. So what that means is the relationship masters react with, they're calm and they're kind. Whereas the relationship disasters take that and it activates their fight or flight response, and they react with threats and hostility. They react with blame and ignore, like just walking off, ignoring them, or just walking away from it. So relationship masters are skilled communicators. They're gentle in the way that they open things, in a sense of, when they feel hurt, they don't say, like, you hurt me. They're like, okay, I feel hurt. I feel hurt because this happened. Whereas the relationship disasters tend to be more defensive, and they'll open up with blame and criticism. It's like, you always do this, you did this before, you did this then. So, and one of the reasons for that is that the relationship masters are calm enough that they're able to pause, and then they respond. So they recognize it might not be fair. They might feel the same, they could take it negatively, but what they do is they wait a little while, work it through, and when they feel calm, that's when they respond. Whereas a relationship disasters typically react from emotion. It's like just angry, like outburst straight back at them. So relationship masters are predominantly appreciative of their partners. So generally appreciative. They're looking around, what can they appreciate? Like, I'm really glad that you did this. I really thank you for doing the washing up, or whatever it is. So what they noticed with the relationship disasters, that they were predominantly looking for what's wrong. They were looking for what they'd done wrong. They were looking for ways that they felt that their partner might feel negatively about them. And so what they noticed, that they both had examples where the masters could have looked at what was wrong, and the disasters could have looked at what was right. But they because the nature of the way that they were looking, they looked for the things that they could see positive rather than negative. So, and another way is that relationship disasters tended to take their partners for granted. They tended to neglect them. They thought, like, now we're in an established relationship, we don't need to continue dating, and I don't need to continue romancing. And whereas the relationship masters recognized that it was a lifelong process, that the romance, the dating, the nurturing and taking care of the partner wasn't just over when they had an established relationship, but it was about always improving that bond. Now, what's really interesting is that if you were to look and see these couples, like when they were together and when they were happy together, the most significant difference wasn't really visibly observable. What they would seem to be sitting calmly and talking, and if like to the untrained eye, you could look at two of them and you could see one bickering, and you'd say, "Oh, they're not going to last long," and you could see another couple that seems so in love. But actually, the most significant difference was measured in their physiological stress levels, because they were all strapped up and hooked up to all these, taking all these kind of physiological measures of stress. What they were able to see is, even though they seem to be calm, they seem to be just having a normal conversation, actually inside, their fight or flight response was activated. Their stress levels were ridiculously high. And what's interesting is, in terms of the stonewalling, people, the partner, and it's typically men that stonewall, and stonewall is about withdrawing to avoid any kind of conflict and just not deal with it, because they just don't think it's going to go well. They don't feel that they can handle it. And so the partners of the men that stonewall, because it's typically men, will say that they just don't care. They couldn't care less. Yet actually, when they're measured, like when they're in these kind of situations, their stress response is through the roof. And so often, often for a man, when he's that stressed, it's either he stonewalls to completely shut down so he doesn't have to deal with it, as a way of trying to minimize and deal with his emotions, or they can become aggressive, and that's where you have more violent situations. So now we're going to get onto the four. So stonewalling is one of the four horsemen, what they talk about as being the big signs that a relationship isn't going to last very long. And so the big four are criticism, which is when you don't just state what hurt you, that you don't just state what you're unhappy with, but it's you become, and you attack the person. Like, you always do this, you always do this, why do you always do this to hurt me? So criticism is obviously, that then leads people to be defensive. So then defensiveness is about just not seeing if there is a point, not taking like the hurt seriously, but it's just like, you put up a shield and it's like, right, well, or you attack back, but it's about not actually dealing with the issue, but trying to shift off blame. And it's about kind of being competitive. Oh, well, it's not, like, I only do that because of you, and so then it gets into a fight. And then the fourth horseman is contempt. So after a period of time of looking for things to blame, after a period of time of criticizing people and feeling defensive, that's when you start to lose respect for someone. And then when you have that contempt, that's where a relationship is really in trouble, because the respect is gone. And when the respect is gone, then the love goes, and then the relationship disintegrates. Okay, so the key findings of the Gottman's research is really down to three things. And these are the three things that you can do to make a relationship work. And that is treating your partner like a good friend. Like, the whole basis of a relationship is being good friends. And the passion, the intimacy, and the sex and all that kind of thing come out of the basic foundation of trust and security and that loving bond. And most of the relationship is just about friendship. It's just about having respect. It's just about trusting each other and liking the other person. Okay, so then the key challenge to every relationship, and to being able to like each other, to be positive and to trust each other, is the ability to handle conflict and to handle conflict in gentle and positive ways. So, as I said, there's always going to be conflict. As Dan Weil said, when you marry someone, you marry a set of problems. Like if you married a different person, you wouldn't have the problems that you have in your current relationship, but you'd have a different set of problems. So there's always going to be a set of problems. And it's about, can you handle that conflict and still love the other person? And so conflict isn't necessarily bad in a relationship. Conflict can actually be positive, because what it does is it deepens the relationship, because underneath the conflict, even if when people are arguing about toothpaste or who left the milk out, what they're really arguing about, what really generates the emotion, is the feeling of, like, I'm feeling neglected because I'm feeling like they don't care. I'm feeling insecure. And if you're able to handle conflict positively, you're able to go beyond the surface thing that you're arguing about to talk about what the real issue is. And when you do that, you understand your partner in a different way. And I think what happens in the relationship disasters is they don't understand the partner as they are. They understand, it feeds, like what they've done, their behaviors feeds on insecurity, and then they feel like they're going to get hurt. They feel like their partner doesn't love them. They feel unloved. They feel neglected. They feel disrespected. And so that's what generates the emotion. It's a way of handling conflict that isn't as productive. It isn't as positive. And so what it does is it's handling conflict from insecurity. And what that does is push the couple apart. And it's really important about how you handle conflict, because it isn't just a conflict, but it's about, if you know that you are falling out, that you can have serious differences where you feel anger and you feel like you really don't like that person at that moment, and you know that person can feel that way about you and yet they won't hurt you, then that's what builds trust. And it's over instances like that, when you understand the partner better and you understand that you can be different, you can have difference, you can be honest, and they won't come back and hurt you. And so then it's about being able to repair after conflicts and negative interactions. So every couple is going to have conflict. Every couple is going to have negative interactions. You're going to get tired. You're going to get stressed. And it's about, are you able to then recognize, like, okay, like I didn't really act like an adult. I wasn't the best. I didn't handle that issue the best. I'm sorry. I feel bad that you feel bad. How can how can we get through this? And so that's the three key things. So you're treating your partner like a friend, handling conflict in a positive way, and then being able to repair after it. So most of us didn't grow up, being taught how to have a relationship, and most of us haven't even got that many, if any, positive role models of people who really consciously handle relationships and know how to do it. And so it may be like, all of us have, like, however great our childhood was, there's going to be some things where we feel that there's going to be some things where we have wounds or things that we've mislearned and whatever, or insecurities, anxieties that are going to show up in a relationship. So when we look back, what's made us who we are is our genes and our experiences, and then it's about our choices. And so life is so busy that often we don't think about, okay, relationship is a set of skills. A relationship requires me to work on the wounds and the baggage and the things I've mislearned in the past. So the fact of whatever you've done in relationships up to now, if relationships haven't worked, it doesn't mean that you can't have positive relationships. Like, this is the big fear everyone has. It's like, I'm always going to be alone because I'm never going to make a relationship work. But actually, if you're able to heal the past wounds, if you're able to make new choices and not overwrite the past, then the outcome is going to be different. Okay, so here I've got a little diagram which shows my what really happens in how a relationship disintegrates, and it's about fear. Relationships are a place where so much of our fears come up. Our fear is because often we judge ourselves by how other people see and treat us, and so we have these insecurities and we have anxieties and we have these fears that people won't love us. We have these fears that people won't like stick around, that people won't be there for us. And so because we feel fear, oftentimes people want to avoid the truth. They don't want to have the difficult conversations. They don't want to like really ask the questions to really get honest about what their fears, because they're scared of what the answer is going to be. And so what happens is this then becomes like we misunderstand and we miscommunicate with each other. And something that someone does, the partner can then look at that and say, well, they do that because they don't care. They do it because they just, like I told them. Like, you may tell someone how you feel, but if they're preoccupied and then they're not like understanding the real meaning that you're telling them, then they can misunderstand, miscommunicate, and so they might do the same thing again, just from ignorance or insensitivity. But it doesn't. But often people will look at that and they'll use that as evidence to prove their fear that the person doesn't really love them. And so this then becomes to where they get hurt, and then because they get hurt, but they're not feeling safe enough, they're not trusting enough to just be honest and look, okay, this really hurt me. And because they're not resolving that hurt, they're not healing it. And so eventually what happens is that they begin to feel disappointed in the person. They begin to feel resigned that this is all it's going to be, because we don't have that kind of relationship. She is not the kind of person that's going to do this. They don't care enough. They don't whatever. But usually it's because people don't have the relationship skills, because none of us have been taught. We all kind of stumble along under an illusion that love is enough to make it all work. And so eventually this disappointment and resignation means that people just withdraw from the relationship. They don't expect anymore. And so sometimes that's like they're kind of given up on that, and then they're looking at like, would it be different with someone else? Maybe, and they tend to like say, well, it's the relationship, it's the other person. I just need to be with someone else. And so either they may leave the relationship or they may start another relationship somewhere else. But usually this is the cycle that will end the relationship. And if it doesn't end it, it can just kind of live in hostility for a while. So people go into relationships with anxieties and insecurities. And I think this is Sue Johnson talks about this, about attachment. And attachment is a theory of how children like with their primary caregiver, like usually the mum. So the person that they spend the most time with in their very first few months, they look to them, and because a baby's helpless, they're looking and they're feeling like they can't, all they can do is cry to communicate. And they have to hope that their carer, their mum, or whoever the carer is responsive enough to know, okay, like I need my nappy changed, I need to be fed, I need to be rocked, I need to be comforted, I need to sleep. And if the mum meets all of those needs, then they trust the mum, they trust that If they cry, someone's going to respond. And so once they trust the mum, they can trust the world. And because they look at the world as being a place where people are generally good, people will generally respond to your needs. If someone grows up and sometimes the mum responds and sometimes they just shout at them, or sometimes or they just get neglected, and so what happens is the baby doesn't trust that the mum will meet their needs, and so from there on they don't trust that the world will meet their needs, and so it's very difficult to form relationships because there's this underlying fear and this underlying mistrust of people. And so when people get into a relationship, often they're looking to replace that initial parental relationship. So if you think about it, a baby's born and they come screaming into the world, and ideally they have loving parents, and like parents with a new baby are just kind of in awe, and everything the baby does, every movement, every smile, they're looking for it, the first words. And so the parents are like, oh, look how gorgeous they are, how look how they smile, how clever she is, how smart he is, and all these kind of things. So a baby just gets that unconditional adoration. And then as they get older, they get to like 3 and they get to 5 and they become a little shit, and the mum and dad are tired and stressed, and they're smashing the glass and they're breaking things and wearing you out, keeping you up at night. And so gradually we don't, and then they're not the novelty anymore. And so we don't have that adoration, and we don't have that. And so they don't get that awe and that love. And so I think people are looking throughout their life to recreate that. And so when they go into their relationships, what they're looking for is their partner to replicate those kind of feelings that the mum, the dad had, of thinking like everything you did was awesome, that every movement was like a miracle. And so people go into a relationship and they're really asking 3 questions. Like, am I special to you? Can I trust you to choose me over everyone else? And will you always be there for me? And so intimate relationships are so much harder than any other relationship, because there's so much more at stake. There's so much more emotion. There's so much more anxiety. There's so much more fear and so many more insecurities. So really, when we're looking at the difference between the relationship masters and the relationship disasters, it's really about, it was summed up as really being kind to your partner. But the ability to be kind is something you can, like, you can be generous if you have something. Like the billionaire can be generous because he has billions to give away. So you have to have something in order to give it. And so kindness is something that you can only give when you're personally happy. If you're stressed, if you're exhausted, if you're feeling depressed, scared, anxious, then it's really hard to get out of your own head and to give kindness. And so what it really takes to be in a relationship, to be kind, and to have that kind of relationship that's going to last and going to work, is a strong foundation of personal happiness. So when you have, like, when you're generally feeling happy, you typically have stable emotions. And so you might have ups and downs, of course, like everyone else, but generally you're feeling positive. Generally, you're able to go through life like you're not worried about the bailiffs coming to the door. You're not worrying about, your sick child who's you're not sure are they going to make it or not. You're not worried about that. It's so happiness is something that you have when you have like these kind of when your safety isn't threatened, and so there's temporary times like I'm talking about, like if you're in severe debt, if your children are ill, if you're under extreme stress. So that's the time when you're not going to be happy. But it's also if you have constant insecurity, constant anxiety, constant lack of stress, lack of trust, that's going to stress you, which is going to make it mean that you're not happy generally. And so then if you're not happy, you can't be kind. And so then if you're unable to be kind, then the relationship probably isn't going to last. So what does it take to have stable emotions? So it's about being able to soothe anxiety, soothe insecurities, so that you're able to stand on a stable base. It's about being able to alleviate anxieties so that you're able to deal with them. And it's about being able to heal past wounds, which trigger both of these. And so really what it takes to be happy is an ability to heal your inner conflicts and to be able to so I have an equation here, and so happiness is really about having the freedom to make wise choices, and then it's about having the confidence to go out and do what you want to do, minus the fear that you're going to feel, and also about having a sense of respect, and respect for yourself, respect for others. So it's about being able to. So all of us want things. We want certain things in life, and wherever we are, there's always something more that we want, and we feel like we want to work towards. And so we have to be able to achieve that takes growth, and to grow means we have to feel that we can do it. We have to, number one, feel that we're the person that we're able to do it, have trust and faith in ourselves. And then confidence is about doing it. Like initially, the first time we do something, it's always going to be awkward. But when we do it time and time again, we develop confidence and we trust ourselves to be able to do it. So fear is an ever-present feature of life, and but fear can debilitate us. So it's about our level of confidence is about our ability to handle fear. And so if we are able to manage our fears so that we can feel fear as a protective device, but still go and do the things that are important to us, then that means that we're able to grow and we're able to feel like we're moving towards the life that we want. And then respect is about the nature of our relationships. If someone acts without respect to other people, then they're just not going to be able to get along with people. And in the long term, they're not going to be able to maintain relationships. They're not going to be able to get the kind of results in whatever they want. And if someone doesn't have the respect for themselves, then they become a doormat, and eventually they have those feelings of bitterness and resentment because they're living their life for everyone else and they're feeling unappreciated. So it's all about achieving a state of happiness, and then from that state of happiness, picking a partner that has integrity and equally has a level of emotional foundation so that you can both give, and whatever you give to the relationship grows the relationship. And so it's not whatever you give isn't giving to the partner, it's giving to the relationship, because both of you are happy, sound, independent individuals. And so you have your own life, and your life is about your happiness. But almost all of us want to connect. All of us want to have someone there that we can love, and someone that will love us, someone to, like a friend that will a companion through the tough times and someone who's there for you. And so that's about being in a place of happiness and having like positivity and wanting to give things to people. So you give to the relationship, and when each gives to the relationship, then it becomes like a virtuous circle where, because they've given you this thing and you're feeling so good about being with them, that you're also wanting to give. And then it becomes a bond where you want to give to the other person because you want to make them feel good. And the essence of making them feel good is it makes you feel good. So what that's all really about is about your operating system. And so what we've talked about in terms of the Gottman's research is skills, their relationship skills, and tools that can be learned. And so they're tools of communication and relationship. But what stops people isn't just the fact that they don't like have a framework of saying things in a positive way, but it's about they don't want to admit their insecurities. They don't want to admit their anxieties because they're scared of what the other person is going to think about them and how they'll react and how they'll feel. And so overcoming the wounds and dealing with the anxieties and the insecurities these are all things that come from our experiences. They're all kind of learned from the time we're born and until now in our different, like in our most strongest emotional experiences. And so what we start with is kind of the core you. That's you at the root, which is like a lot of the kind of genetics of your disposition, of what you're really about, what you really the person that you really are. And so after that, there's beliefs. Beliefs are mostly picked up before the age of 7. It's kind of like we see the sun rise every day, and so we believe that the sun will be there tomorrow. And so that belief is testable over and over again. But the belief that the world is a dangerous and a hostile place is a belief that you can look and you can see everyday instances of hostility, but equally you can see how much money people give to charity. You can see how much kindness people do even when they've got nothing to gain. And so it's understanding that some of your beliefs are false, and you have to, maturity is the ability to take the childhood belief and re-examine it and then overwrite it. And maturity is looking at something that you saw from the nature of how we learn about life. Just we kind of stumble through and we learn from our parents' views and we take that in, and that becomes a belief. And often we never really look at it again. And so it's about rewriting the operating system, is about rewriting those beliefs. So there's also narratives, and narratives are like reality is just the facts of what happens. But we can't live by the facts. We need a story for things to make sense to us. And so the narrative is the story that we make up of. So we make a story for everything. But our conflict is based on our differences in narratives and our differences in beliefs. And so the way that you resolve conflict positively is you understand and you separate what is the story and what is the belief and what is the truth. And when you get to what the truth is, like the truth is, and I know people say, well, I have my truth and you have your truth. But that's not what I'm talking about, the truth. The truth is that if someone says that the sun will rise tomorrow. Like tomorrow, we'll find out whether that's the truth or not. If someone says the earth is round and someone else says the earth is flat, then the truth is what we can find out, and to some extent, because we're not actually looking at it and we can argue it from every point of belief, but it's about, oftentimes we can't get to the truth, but we can re-examine the belief for the belief that is most true. And so all of our beliefs are just kind of working guesses, and it's like science. And I think we have to view it in the same way as science, that science works on hypotheses, but it's constantly checking, are those hypotheses true? And so we have beliefs, but typically we argue for our beliefs. We don't test our beliefs. And so it's not being rooted in an argument to what we believe, but it's being rooted to, is what we believe really still true? And there's an old story that's gone about for years. I think I wrote about it in my book, and it's the story of roast beef. And so there's a girl that comes from an old Italian family, and she meets a boy, and he comes in, and he comes for Thanksgiving dinner, and the grandma is cooking this roast beef, and he watches her, and he sees the he sees her cook the beef, and they have the beef, and they have the dinner, and he's watching, and he sees like she's cut a large bit of the beef off, and he watches, but he doesn't say anything because it's still quite a new relationship. And he goes back year after year, and he sees like the daughter start to cut the beef, and he's like, "Why are you doing that?" She said, "Well, that's what my mum and my grandmum did. That's what you do with beef, isn't it?" He said, "Nobody else does that." And so then they go back and they ask, and they ask the mum, and she said, "Well, that's what mum did." And then they asked the grandmum, and she said, "Well, when we came over from the old country," she said, "well, the oven wasn't big enough." And so so often that's how we learn things. Like we learn, someone does something in a specific instance for like reasons of practicality, but we don't understand that as a 5-year-old, and we see that's the way it's done, because dad's an adult and dad knows everything, and so I'm going to be like dad and I'm going to follow what he does. And so many of the things that we believe we've taken in just with a child's kind of understanding, and we've operated on that understanding ever since. And a lot of those things are the reasons that cause our problems, because they clash with reality, and so they clash with truth, and truth will always win out. So stress is really our narrative and our belief fighting against truth. And so if you want to be happy and if you want to relieve stress, it's about understanding that you can't beat the truth. And so like the reality of the situation isn't going to change. So you have to change your narratives and your beliefs about the situation and correct where their problems are, so that you can harmonize with the reality of what is. And so then our self-esteem is built up of our narratives, our beliefs about ourselves, the way that other people have treated us. And it's not necessarily because of the way that other people have treated us, but because if our belief is how other people treat us determines how valuable we are, then that shows us I'm not worth anything. Like if people have treated me badly, clearly I mustn't be worth anything. And also self-esteem is about, all of us have responsibilities. All of us make promises, make commitments, and we feel we can excuse it to everyone else. We can justify it even to ourselves. But deep down, how we're judging ourselves is, do we have the integrity to meet the promises and the commitments that we made? And so it's about, people can get away with treating other people badly, and they can justify it to themselves and they can avoid thinking about it. But they, deep down, they have to think about that. They have to know. And deep down, every time in the mirror, when they look in the mirror, they're looking in the mirror, and there's a part of them that's saying, like, you're a shitbag, you did that, you treated people badly, you're a bad person. And so self-esteem is really about making peace with yourself. And it's not about innate value, like as in, like, because you have this status or something that you're important, but it's about, like, am I living up to the person that I want to be? And so you have all these things that make up your operating system, and then your operating system comes into contact with all of these different areas of life where we have different challenges, like in family, in work, in a sense of, like, making sense of why we're here and what we're about, in a sense of dealing with money, in a sense of romantic relationships and how loved we are and how loved we feel, and dealing with friends and all those kind of things. And so that's really why I believe that the operating system is so core to being able to have a good relationship. Having a relationship is about the skills, and it's about the skills. We've gone through those skills that the Gottmans talked about. But skills take a while to develop, but also they need to have the foundations, because if you don't have the emotional foundations to support and sustain the skills, then you're not going to do, because it's not just about, like, if you use this script, that's going to make the relationship work. It's about, if you it's about, will you do it with 100%, with feeling like really living the spirit of that, of the intention and the communication that you're caring about. And so relationship readiness is about looking through and looking and trying to, so relationship readiness works whether you're in a relationship or not in a relationship. And it's about the, like, how, so a relationship is determined by the two individuals in it. And so relationship readiness is being the best able you can to support that relationship. And it's not to prop up the other person. It's about, you do the work so that you meet someone of an equivalent level, and so that you can have a great relationship without hassles, without the heartache, and without the pain that come from having, like, if you have a relationship on any other basis, and so lots of people get into relationships because they're feeling like they need support. They feel like they need to deal with insecurities, anxieties, and they feel like a relationship is gonna help them cope with that. But then what you're doing is, then you're coming into a relationship with, it's kind of contaminating it, and then it means that the relationship isn't going to work. So for me, fundamentally, the first thing that you need to do is work on the human operating system, and understanding what's going on in your operating system, to healing your wounds, and so that you show up as the best you that you can in that relationship.